The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people are evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, a group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Hawaiian Volcano Tracker update. Today is Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. We're a day earlier from our usual schedule because tomorrow there is a Volcano Awareness Month talk by the USGS. That's why we're with you guys on a Wednesday. And the story this week is Kilauea's eruption continues to evolve in the expected fashion. The lava lake active surface has shrunk. The number of fountains that were many before have reduced to just one, and lava is still flowing and circulating within a pit. Mauna Loa is quiet, and that's what we're looking at today. We have some extra footage of the beginning of the eruption, Dane, both from USGS webcams and from National Park photographer Janice Way, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. How you doing today, man? You're quiet.
Well, I was saying I was doing good. Interesting to see the evolution of this lava lake real quickly in the past week, under a week now. We've seen this lava lake go from covering the entire footprint of that previous lava lake surface to now being into two pools, that former lava lake, and now seems to be making its own new one at a new vent where activity seems to be focused out of.
Yeah, it really is interesting how quickly it's happened, right? I was comparing this to both the September 2021 and December 2020 eruptions. The December 2020 took the longest. It might have taken over a month, separate, somewhere in that range. And 2021 was a couple 3 weeks of it actually shrinking back to a smaller size, and we've done most of that within the first week here. So it is an accelerated process that we're seeing here. Maybe it's because the lava lake level is higher. It's got a further area to spread out. I'm not really sure about that, but we can note that the timeline is a little different. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's the biggest thing that stands out immediately is just how quick this thing is progressing, right? So yeah, we'll dive into it. We will be taking your questions in chat. If you have any, just go ahead and put them in there, and we will try and answer those later in the program. And yeah, we'll go ahead and go over Kilauea mostly, not a whole lot on Mauna Loa, but we'll discuss it a little bit, huh?
Yeah, we'll touch base there at the end just to show everyone what's going on, but it's really not a whole lot.
All right.
So Haldane, yeah, so what you guys see on the screen here between us, let's make it bigger so you can see it better, is a time-lapse that I've been producing with Andre's time-lapse server. Mahalo, Andre, if you're watching. And this is just the nighttime views of the KW camera since eruption began there. So you can see that first night, the lava is covering most of that crater floor, although there's an island in the middle that has within it that basin with lava within it as well. And you can see over the last several nights how it's retreated to that smaller area. Let it loop here a couple so you guys can catch that. And let me point out here, so this is that old persistent western lava lake right there. This is the West Vent Complex over here. You can see that inner lake was reactivated. Maybe you can't see it at this speed, but we went over this last time. How lava actually seemed to have moved in from the east into that lake and then spread across it and then lit up the West Vent. And then a former West Vent 1.0 from the 2020 eruption over here as well. And it's also filling in this southeast pit of that distant lava lake. But really the source of activity is these fountains over here in the southeast part of the crater. And all the brighter glow, we'll see at different cameras that give us a better view, but all the bright glows there are where the main persistent fountains are. And there's a whole bunch of them in this initial early phase, but as it progresses on, we focus to a single fountain more or less right in here. So that's the easiest short summary view to share with you guys for Kilauea. For Mauna Loa, just going to show you this one plot of the earthquake rates for the past year. So this is earthquakes per week here on the left. In the whole last year of activity. This was the week leading up to and starting our eruption. And so what we're looking at on Mauna Loa is these low levels. You see it drop down, and it's really crashed down to not a whole lot down here in the bottom. So that kind of summarizes what Mauna Loa is doing. It's just it's pretty wound down from that eruption and doesn't show any signs of anything happening. So we'll go in more detail later, but that's the quick version for those of you guys who only have like a minutes here. All right, so let's get into Kilauea first. However, I'm going to do it a little different this week, and we're going to show the volcano watch from last week. You know, we're a little bit off in the schedule, so another volcano watch comes out tomorrow, but we're focused on last week's here. And last week's was an article about remote cameras providing new views of new eruptions. So they have an image in here of the Mauna Loa camera that was streaming live, and they talk about how they've been really deploying these webcams as a crucial part of the monitoring network to be able to see visually what's happening on the ground, right? So in a Mauna Loa eruption, they could tell that lava was not coming down a southwest rift because they could see cameras there that were showing no change in the ground. And likewise on Kilauea, they were able to actually go through a whole website, a webcam upgrade, and they were adjusting all of that as eruption actually began. So we got a little bit more resolution and some better images and some better framing of some of the activity on Kilauea because of that. So in this article that came out last week, essentially was written before and as the eruption was starting. They do mention that they have learned quite a bit about putting up the live videos, given the challenges of the remote location on Mauna Loa. They talked about how there were other cameras that they did not live stream, but they actually just captured images and got picked up by the scientists later on. So at some point, you'd imagine it would have more time lapses of the Mauna Loa eruption coming up. They're also doing video lapse cameras where they're shooting a 20-second video every 15 minutes to give a better idea of things like flow speed and flow volume within a channel, and that's something that they're using to inform their hazard planning. And so that was especially the case in Mauna Loa. So that's essentially what this Volcano Watch details here. So we'll leave it to you guys to read it in detail if you like on hawaiitracker.com. But I wanted to start with that because the first things we'll look at here are the webcam views. So we did see these initial views of January 5th of a geologist with the equipment looking into the lava lake there, and the lava lake itself kind of spread out. But there's some other images that were posted here for January 4th, day before the eruption began. And this is showing HVO scientists upgrading a Kilauea Summit webcam on that 4th. All right, so there it is, they're upgrading the webcam. The KW camera here. They compare the before view to the after view. So you can see it's got quite a bit more contrast in the colors. You see a little bit more detail, and it's a little bit wider angle as well. So that's was a fortunate and timely change there the day before the eruption began. And having seen that, then I can pull for you guys here. This is the right one. Yeah, the camera from USGS that shows a beginning phase of burst of lava on the crater floor. So there is that central island. We're looking towards the east now, so there's that drained pond right in there. And here comes the fountain starting up, and I'll zoom it in so you can see it better there. There comes the fountain. You see that big puff of gas coming up, and the fountain's growing high, and it's sloshing out this big pool of lava here to the north, left of the screen here. See that cools pretty quickly. It hardens and is turning a gray color there. It's likely still liquid on the inside, of course. But that's the beginning of that lava lake just bursts out there. See, there's a smaller fountain here, a smaller fountain here, but the main one comes up near the southern end of this central island here. That's where it really bursts up. And so, see it there? They've advanced it a little bit here, so you can see that in that early phase, it wasn't the steady, low dome fountaining, but it was almost more like these geyser bursts, right? So it was bubbling, and you have an occasional larger expulsion of gas. You see this massive amount of gas here, and look how high that fountain's getting. So when we heard early on in USGS updates that the fountains are reaching up to 160 feet plus, it seems like this is that phase they're discussing right here, right? That's got to be 160 foot. Seems like. And they're sending another, looks like a wave of lava, wave front moving across to the north here, fanning out. One thing that's been happening is as the lava collects in this area from around the fountains, it's building a perched pond, like an elevated pool of lava that's hardening on its edges that kind of keeps it all contained. But occasionally as the lava flows fill that area, they can overtop that, or in that particular case, when you have this big fountain coming and splashing down, it just breaks that whole front of it, and the whole pond just comes bursting out of there. Seems to be what's happening. So that's the USGS KW camera view. Let's turn now to Janice's account, right? And so she sent a video. This is the video of her arriving at the overlook, and you can see there is that one of those first puffs of gas coming up. And she lingers probably a little longer than I would have. I probably would have cut the video here at 5 seconds and started running to get a little closer, but she gets there sooner than later regardless there. But there's that big puff of gas that comes out at the beginning. And then she switches over to that tighter view, and I've cropped it a little bit to start here, of that fountain there on the left. And by this point, you already see some of these first lava flows on the right moving slightly through here, all this lighter gray stuff in there. But you can see this burst continue. There's another high burst of lava. It's dropping all the way down here. To the right, it's hitting that edge of that ponded flow there, and really releases this flood of lava that comes up. Look at that wave. This is now playing in real time. Comes and overtops this feature that's raised a bit here. You can see it looks like a breaking wave coming across here. See some of the other areas that are still liquid from the flow getting pulled up. Maybe you can't see that quite as well unless I zoom it way in there. See, there's like a standing wave coming across this lava. Really fascinating stuff. Comes another one, another burst, and more waves visible in the closer parts through here. Looks like we have another burst coming up here. And maybe this time I'll zoom it in a little more. See some of the, I see a shadow coming down. That must be the gas plume, and then here comes the lava crashing down. And there is that edge of that breaking wave. Across. Gonna hit that little islet feature there and splash over it. And you still see breaking waves and sloshing and churning happening back here in the background as well. So that's our real-time view. I did also speed it up so you could see that whole sequence without the gap and get the bigger picture of how it's all flowing. Even in between these bursts, this whole liquid silvery area is moving, as you can see now that it's sped up. And you have these occasional bursts coming out, sloshing over. So I had previously trimmed this interval in between the two sloshes, but you can see there in real time, well, it's sped up there, but uncut sequence, and now zoomed out there, how that actually looks. Pretty cool stuff to see that initial sequence caught in that great detail. You could probably do all kinds of physics calculations there as looking at the wavelength and all. One final video here, she's zoomed into the fountain itself, and there's a lot of fume in the way, of course, but there's quite a lot to see in here. I was focusing myself in the areas right in there. You can see those waves kind of moving. It really looks like an ocean of lava there, right? You can see sloshing against the, almost like a shoreline right there. See several of these churning areas and causing waves that break. I think there's some more down in the area over here. Let's see if I can spot some of those coming. Here we go. Just want to look at that wave right there. It's something we've talked about a lot in the past, but it's not something there's been a lot of footage over the years. Some from Kilauea Iki, but really amazing footage of these waves of lava being generated by the violent outbursts of lava from crater floor. Really cool stuff. Mahalo, Janice, for sharing that. I'm sure all of our viewers and community can really sense the power of this thing and get a sense of awe. And of course, a lot of us that lived through 2018 have that healthy respect already, but it's still something else to see it once again. Its context there. So that's from Janice. Once again, mahalo, Janice. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it's really cool to see her be able to get in the right position at the right time, right? And that's really what this opening stage of the eruption was, is having to have somebody basically already in the park with camera equipment ready to go at a moment's notice to be able to get this type of footage, because they was so vigorous in the beginning. It seems like the fountain drowned itself out and prevented itself from reaching those high fountains again with all just the volume that was sitting on top of the vent soon afterwards.
Yeah, and I think there's really the pattern of gas is something to mention as well, right? We've talked in the past how the pattern is that you get a whole bunch of gas at the beginning and it tails off as it goes on. And I think that's true even in a micro scale, right? Probably within the first few minutes you get a whole bunch more. It's gathering in bigger bubbles within the lava underground. So it comes out as one giant burst, and that's why the fountain is shooting so high. And after the first, call it, hour of that, then you don't have as big of bubbles anymore. You still have a whole bunch in there, and obviously it's enough to sustain a fountaining for days and days and days and days, but it's not shooting it in the air that's 160 feet in that opening hour there.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Really cool.
Really great footage, though. Yeah.
Really enjoy seeing those waves there. Let me one last zoom in on this one here as it comes across. And you guys, it's so spectacular. There's not a whole lot of these eruptions we've caught that we've had anyone catch the very, very beginning phases, right? December 2020, USGS got there just after, and they, you know, have some amazing pictures of the very opening phases, but they didn't actually see it come out of the ground. Right, and 2021 seems similar, right? We didn't actually see it. We saw it very quickly erupting through that crater floor, but we didn't see a big outburst like this, where one big burst and then flooding it out and establishing that lake to start with. Really cool stuff there. Right, we'll probably let it play through all the way again, but then we'll go extra long, so I'll avoid a temptation, let you guys rewind if you like. And we'll move forward here to the next USGS camera capture. And this one is from the B1 camera that's on that eastern rim looking to the west. So there it is right there. That burst of gas and the lava. Zoom it in there. A little hazy from this angle here, but there it is. You can see that the footage from the overlook is actually a bit better than this. Right? Not a web camera, professional camera. So there's a webcam doing a decent job showing us that burst of flow to the north here. And then winding down and then bursting forward again. And this video doesn't go catch all the sequences that we saw in Dennis's video. It does give you that opening salvo. Once again, look at that massive cloud of gas that you see initially there. So there's still gas you can see now, but it's not like that. Right? It's not this giant V-shaped thing shooting into. Now, since we just looked at the B1 camera, and since some of you guys may have not caught this last week, or it's worth showing again, I thought I'd play this Hornito close up here. The eruption comes out of here, it comes all the way around. The Hornito actually drops down, gets flooded with lava, and then bobs back up. Lava collects around the top of it, and it forms that little islet, which has become a landmark since it is fixed to that crater floor by that tall pillar there. It also gives you good depth of the lava there, right? So you can see there's that Hornito. That thing was an order of 30 feet tall, we believe, before this eruption began. So more or less 30 feet deep there, you would imagine. Given the accumulation on top of that feature and the lava being even with that there. So that's what that looked like there. And to just wrap up the opening sequence, here's the F1. So again, showing that version of the opening sequence. And the F1 camera actually went offline after that, so we'll cut it off here and resume it later. But there it is, that initial phase. By the time this camera is capturing, you can see the flow spreads very quickly north and then to the west, and then back to the south here, and then also south and west and north. Right? Around both sides it meets and encloses this central area that includes the central island and this, I'll call it a lava shield area that's around this old western lava lake basin here. This thing would fill up and overflow and pushed up and down, so it's natural that this area from here, this being the peak of it, would slope down in the directions, right? Because it's got accumulation of overflows from that area. So that's likely why you had that island persist there. But also, as we mentioned before, there is that beginning of the lava coming through that lava tube, emerging there on that eastern side of that pit, and then it fills in quickly afterwards, and you see this colder area, or at least not bright, right, darker area with a bright refilled basin in the middle. So let's go back to the images here. Let's see, where was I? So we did January 5th, and we'll go backwards here. So there is the eruption map. That's still a couple days old. This is not updated since the 6th, but in case you haven't seen it yet, the red is at that moment of the 6th what was actually active. The pink is what got covered during that first phase, and yellow was not covered. So there's that high ground middle there. There's another sliver over in here somewhere, didn't get covered as well. But otherwise, if we were to draw it now, you'd have a much smaller area that's more or less in here. Maybe I can try it if I were to just kind of guess it more or less, but you're looking at something more in an area like that now on this side. It would seem like. Right, so continuing on. Respond, here we go. Some other images. There's images of that central island right in here. There's that initial spot of outburst, and this is putting out flows that are moving in this direction and out that way and this way. But there are other vents here that are kind of off screen. There's one that you can see at the top here, but there's other ones that off that direction. They're putting out lava going in this direction here. So what you see in this zone in between right here is the junction, right? So the lava is coming together in both places, and where it's coming together from both sides, crust is not staying intact and it's breaking apart. And when it breaks apart, it's releasing a lot of that gas from beneath the crust and it's causing small fountains. So what you actually have here is this small surface scale bubbling where these two flows, surface flows, are coming together on a lake, which is pretty interesting. And that's something I showed you guys in a time lapse last week, but I'll repeat it again and point it out again today. So there's one of those fountains on that eastern side. There is that wider view showing that one we're just looking at, the dividing line, the junction line right there, and then a two on a further east that were feeding lava in that direction. And once again, the webcams that are all capturing a lot of this for us that are not there. I'm in the caldera every single moment, unlike the webcam. The geologists are doing laser rangefinder measurements in this image here. So look forward to getting more information on that. We did show this video of the lava lake from that low overflight and these other images here last week as well. So we'll leave that photo set there and move on to this USGS image, which is just one day, January 7th. So this is that second to third day of eruption. And the vents are over here. That central island's way in the back. So here is that cluster of fountains that becomes dominant after that initial phase. And see the lava's coming towards the camera here, and there's a clear margin. This is the edge of that perch pond area. You occasionally have these overflows that are breaching it and sending lava across the edge. You see the change from night to day. In the daytime, you can see the fountains as red and occasional little overturning areas within the lava lake that are red as well, but not nearly as dramatic as what you see at nighttime, of course. And right there in the middle, that little spot that's static and fuming, zoom in on it, that's the tip of that hornito, that's that islet that I shared with you guys just a few minutes ago. And back to night, you see the changing of the light there. There's the edge of that perch pond, and you see waves just kind of coming and thickening it in every direction there. Fascinating to see this documented in this manner. Really cool to see that there. That was a B1 camera from USGS for a single day. And what we'll do now is take the B1 camera for the whole of the eruption thus far. So there is our original hornito before it gets buried. There is that central island back in here, and it comes up from this area. So that whole first sequence of it getting flooded is going to come pretty fast. There it is. What I'm hoping to show you guys now that we're going to go across several days is how the lava lake has shrunk in its active area. So there is that same initial phase we just saw, and maybe you can see the lava edge retreating further in. By this point on the 8th, it's over near this little islet hornito. There's the edge of it way over there now. And you can maybe see from the right side of the image it's retreated back in this direction as well. Fascinating change there. Of course, everything is liquid lava underneath this entire crust everywhere. It's just a matter of where it's active on the surface. And we'll get more into that later. So turning to the F1 camera, here is that second sequence after the camera comes back online. So you see the edge of the lava lake was back over here, and retreats coming in. You see that same persistent refilled western lake there. The west vent pond has also been glowing. You see that southeast pit also glowing, so lava has come back in, even though it came from this direction, and it does look like, if I zoom in on this maybe, see a little better, the circulation pattern does look like the entry point's over here, and does seem to be flowing across in that direction like that. It's the opposite pattern from before, which is really fascinating to me, right? So it's reusing that same pathway that clearly goes underneath this crust over here. Right? It might go more like that, actually. Who knows exactly how it goes, but in some way gets over to here and enters and migrates across there. So while I have it zoomed in, we can also look at the fountains on this F1 view. So we're in a later stage. There's our single fountain after it stabilizes, but as this thing moves back around, you'll see how the initial fountains are actually more to the left, to the north over here. This pit that you see on the separated from this main pond now, but it's on the east side of this central island. There you see, there it is where it burst out. It was connected to start. There's other fountains that were present early on. What actually happens here, and I don't have the date visible on the screen, but this is from the 8th to the 9th, is we actually have a small deflation-inflation event. And during the deflation of the volcano, we see the lava level actually drop. When it reinflates, it rises again, right? So it's once again showing us a pretty well-connected system from the magma source down below through to the surface. And it bursts out from this area more or less in here, and that area becomes a source of overturning, and it is likely a little lava tube connection that comes through this way as well, right? And that's why I might speculate that perhaps there's some connection, right, from there to there in some way. But the trick is that we have this central island in the way there, and it might have some depth to it, so that might be a blockage, and it might have to go through some other way, or maybe there's a tunnel through there, who knows. So interesting to note how when lava level drops, you see this little channel dry up and then come in here. Also, while we're talking about these lava tubes, and this is something you can see in several of the cameras, there's a little spot off here to the north separated that also seems to be connected by some kind of pathway, some little tube there that as this lake fills up, it's able to still leak out at that farthest edge over there. So now we loop back around, see the whole sequence again. Let me zoom it out so you can see how it's really retreating. So there it goes back, it comes back up. That's the inflation and deflation inflation event. But then a longer term pattern of it retreating continues there as well. Right? We still have more deflation and inflation events happening now. So what we're seeing more is almost like an oscillation. It gets a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, and then every time it's getting smaller, it's getting slightly smaller than before, so it's a net shrinking of it, but it's doing it in an oscillating fashion. So that is the F1, and just to drive that point home, here's the last 24 hours animation from a USGS of the F1 camera, and even in the last 24 hours, you can see pretty clearly how the lava lake has really changed its footprint here. So there it is, more like this now, and there it was 24 hours ago. See, it's not as dramatic as the whole eruption, of course, but from here, moving all the way into there in the course of one day. Okay, so there's more images to see. So our next photo set here is from January 8th. And there is Mauna Loa in the background, the sunrise hitting it. Lava lake in the foreground. There is that western lake. Here is our southeastern lake with that dominant fountain there. And at this point in time, on the 8th, the morning of the 8th, pre-dawn, we still had the very last occurrence of these other fountains here to the side. You still see them. Telephoto view of that dominant dome fountain there. A little bit lower angle, and similar to those views that we saw from the helicopter. Higher up now, there is that persistent lake in the background, and here in the foreground, a newer one. I have to come up with a better name for that, whether it's the southeast lake or the southeast pond. It's kind of still pretty big there, so we'll see what shape it settles into, and maybe that'll give us a better hint of what to see what the USGS terms it first there. We also have some thermal images. So here's a thermal map zoomed in there. So it's showing the fountaining sources in this redder color right in there. And for you guys, see a little bit of the network of cracks and I get bubbling even between these big plates off on the edge. And the lighter blue is showing everything that got covered in lava from that initial outburst. So the darker blue lava there, that's the area that was not overrun. That's the high ground island right here. You see there's a hot lava filling the basin in the southeast pit in the middle. And the other one of these areas is up in here. There's somewhere in here. I'm not sure if this is it, but it looks like it could be it. So there's an area that's also not been covered by that initial outburst. Zoomed out, here's how it looks. So within that larger Kilauea caldera, it's in that innermost pit still. It's getting close to the edge. It will overflow if it reaches that height, somewhere in this direction up here onto this downdrop block area, which is bounded by these large cliffs still. So it's got a huge area to fill in there once it gets past its current level into this next one, which is close. But then it's got a whole bunch to fill before it could actually spill out onto this area where there is another set of cliffs that keeps it in the crater as well. So it's got plenty of space to go without having to get out and affect anyone or anything. And it's the perfect place for an eruption to be. So I believe that is it for the January the 8th set. But we've been talking about the changing fountain locations, and so one good way to look at this is the S1 camera. And here is an animation from when it comes online, once eruption's already started. So you actually can see the camera does move a few times, but you see the various different vents in here. And sorry about that flashing, there is some that SGS nighttime views. You see that there is our single fountain now. Whereas if I were to rewind it back, and you'll see how that compares to all the multitude of fountains we had before. It's about the same height. It might be slightly bigger. Hard to tell from these views and this distance. So it could be that the focus is just to one part of that fissure below the lake here. But it's not exactly clear here, and how much mixing is going on underground as well. So there is early on. Here's our central island. That was our first fountain that burst out. And then we had these two come next as well, this one here as well. And if I advance it forward, let's see. Hanging on me a little bit here. Oh, there is a single one. I was trying to get that in between stage somewhere in here. There it is. So we've lost the main fountain over here. We're migrated to the cluster over here in the southeast. And it's after that second phase that we focus on just a single one here as time goes on. That's how those fountains evolve over time here. I can let that play a little bit more. There you still see several of them. And it's right before dawn, so when it comes into daytime, you don't see them anymore, and it's only a single fountain. So that was the warning of the 8th. That's the S1 camera. We'll look at the V1 as well, and once again, we've just trimmed the camera positioning so we catch just this one area. So there you put it back here. There is the many small fountains. This is going to be the one that becomes dominant over here on the right. So this is really sped up, but just kind of note where the fountains are. They seem like they stay mostly in the same place there. Once they pop up in that area, right? And then you can see here it's focused in a single place. And now I zoom the camera in, and that's why I might have get slightly bigger zoom factor. And you see they stay more or less in the same spots, even as a lava crust moves all around them. Although, as we mentioned before, the first one opened up back over here, and then over here, and then over this way, right? So we did have them appearing in a sequence, but each individual one does not appear to be moving. So while we're on this subject, it seems we discussed this a little bit yesterday. This is the gas that's bringing the lava up to the surface. It's the gas likely trying to come up straight through that lava lake, and very likely that fissure is pretty close to directly underneath this main source that we have remaining now. Right, hard to say that for the opening phases there, but now that it's focused in this one spot, it seems pretty likely that it's somewhere down below this area over here in the east, right, as opposed to in the west like we had it in the last two versions of this eruption. Right, so that's that V1 camera, and that is the one that is hosting the live feed. So here is a live feed from USGS on YouTube, and there is that main fountain bursting in real time. Still shooting in the air. It's probably shooting somewhere in order of 5 meters, right? 15 15 feet or so, I would guess, based on USGS reports and what I'm seeing right here. You don't really see the crust moving, right? But it is. These little cracks are a little indication that there is movement happening, so it's having to create that separation to accommodate the motion. And that's why I like to really speed these things up, so you really can see that motion of the crust in easier form. But there it is, still going strong. We'll finish the webcams on the KW camera, and I've put this back to January the 4th because we actually have the older, so it's nighttime. Here's the older, not as good camera, switching to the good camera. Then you get one night of darkness, and then it pops back on with our clear view, and here comes the eruption. What was it created at nighttime? I previously showed you guys just the nighttime shots, but nighttime and daytime moving around, shadows coming across, moon coming up, lake is retreating. See this larger variation of colors, right, from day to night, night to day. It can be a little easier to see that sometimes when you just look at the nighttime views, just like I showed you guys at the beginning. But for completeness here, you can see the whole sequence all the way through. Why this possible point of view. You can see how the wind is blowing the fog in every direction there. It seems to be swirling around. And there's quite a lot of gas coming out still, but you can tell just visually it's not nearly that same inverted V shape. That same V-shaped cloud that we saw with that massive gas billowing upwards that we saw at the start of the eruption. So pretty cool. There is that KW camera. All right, so what I'll just do, since we always want to make sure we're not getting caught off guard mid-update here, we'll give this page a quick refresh and just look at our KW camera. Things look like they have no change there. Really not a lot of major change in the F1 camera either. There's that live view. We have S1 back on the index page here. We have a nice view of that perched pond edge there, and looks like there's a little overflow happening off the edge right there. Yeah, maybe a little clearer to see if it load up. That's still ongoing, and likely this area is the area that's going to be getting the most elevation and getting thicker and higher. Similar to that lava shield as I described it around that western vent pond, persistent lake. We would expect to have another bump occurring over here as the lava piles up near the vent over here. There's the V1 view, so there's a lava lake still back next to that little islet distance there. To get a better view there. And most of the other cameras are not showing a whole lot anymore. They were showing a little bit when lava first burst out into the very far corner of the crater when it was filled the whole thing, but in the recent days I have that spot again down in here. So probably still hot and glowing from time to time, but the main action is a little bit further over scene. So with that said, let's talk about the lava viewing conditions here. And first to mention, the national park does have an eruption viewing site, right? So you can come and check on this for the conditions on any given day. And big warning up front, expect major delays and limited parking due to high visitation. Parking areas may close unexpectedly when full. Consider viewing the eruption from less crowded areas, hike to popular viewing areas from other parking lots, or visit at an unconventional time, before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. for the best experience there. So the link to the live stream, they have a map here, right? So we'll discuss the map, the entrance station being here, visitor center right there across from the Volcano House. Volcano House is a place where you can get some viewing, but walking a trail over to Waldron Ledge, Kupinati Pali, and further from there along that trail, you also get other views, right? So you can kind of spread out along the edge there and get different views. The spot north is Uekahuna. The viewpoint is pretty much right in here. So if you come to that old Jagger Museum parking lot, the area that is off to the west over here is closed still. We'll mention that in a second. but you basically turn and walk towards the Kilauea overlook or the opposite way, Kilauea towards Uwikahuna. There is where you get the view that whole eastern side, and that's where the most of the lava is. You can't see that renewed basin with a lava lake back in it from that area. But you can see all this area. And finally, the one that caught that eruption opening sequence, Kanakakoi overlook, is over here. So we'll show you some updated views from these areas as well. But before we get to that, I thought it would be appropriate now, and this is not something I showed before, but back in December, we had this short video from the national park advising.
It's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year, but here at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, it's also the most crowded. You visit this busy holiday season. Explore the park website before you arrive. It's a virtual stocking stuffed with essential information. And don't forget to download the free NPS app. It's like having a ranger in your pocket. The eruption is showing no signs of slowing down for the holidays. Expect parking lots to be busy or closed when full now through January. For the best experience, arrive before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. If there's no parking, visit another area or try again later. Your park is open 24 hours a day. Kilauea and Mauna Loa are sacred and cherished landscapes. Be considerate when you share the overlooks with others. Avoid blinding others by pointing flashlights and headlamps at the ground. Use your indoor voice when sharing overlooks. And leave your Bluetooth speaker at home. We look forward to seeing you in your park. Haole la nui and happy holidays.
So that was a park message that was put out prior to the holidays there, and we have a renewed press release here from a couple of days ago, essentially repeating that. There are lots of crowds, tips to avoiding crowds, and know before you go, visit the website or the app, and be flexible, especially with the times. Park open 24 hours a day, be respectful, be safe. Adjust your expectations. Many visitors are here to witness this amazing natural phenomenon, and likely will be crowded together at overlooks. Be considerate, and strive to protect the quality of everyone's experience. Use indoor voice, leave mobile sound system at home, point headlights down at the ground to avoid noise. Use of drones is prohibited without a permit from the superintendent. So that's just a little bit of recap on that. And as Dane was referring to last week, there was a release that came out on Thursday, and noting that safety and species preservation are key for the new eruption. So people were coming all around the caldera, but they were making sure to protect a few certain areas. In this case, it's for the Nene. So they do have Pu'ai Overlook and parking lot closed for the Nene, and also the overlook west of Uwikahuna Nene. Restrooms, parking lot, and viewing areas to the east remain open. So that's the basics of it. I'll avoid the whole rest of that. But I will, since I did muddle this a little bit last week, just clarify here. Back on December 16th was when originally the Uwikahuna Overlook was partially reopened. Reopened the restroom, parking lot, and overlook over towards where you can currently see the lava lake, as well as the trail that connects to Namakani Paio campground. Right, so also would be possible to walk from the highway over there. Tour buses and vehicles over 25 feet in length are allowed to park in that parking lot once again, and they essentially are saying that the Nene family may have moved to another location further away from the parking lot over where the area is still closed. So that's the whole story there of the park. And we mentioned a map once again. So here is our first video. This is similar to what I showed you before. This is from Uwikahuna. And what I've done here is just combine 2 different days. January 5th, this is when we had that initial burst. There's 2 of those western fountains, that main islands over here to the right. And then this here is January 7th in the evening. So you see the lava lake area has retreated. You have less fountains, they're not quite as big, and you have essentially one flow pattern radiating from the center of this group of fountains. Whereas before, there is that dividing joining line right through there, where the 2 flows are coming together, and it's bubbling and spattering in between there. And don't see that in the second frame here. We don't see these back crater walls illuminated. The lava lake is quite large, but it's not all the way up against the edge of the crater wall. by this third day in, unlike you see here that first night. So pretty good views from Wikahuna. Like I said, you can't see that other pit in the central island to the right, but you can see most of the area of this lake here. If you were to be over, we'll go clockwise from Wikahuna, so that would be more or less 12 o'clock on the map there. It's time. There it is. So Wikahuna up here. We'll go clockwise. Steaming Bluff, Wahine Kapu over here. If you're in an area there, here's an image from Lance Page over the Moonbow. And there it is, a view from Steaming Bluff area. You can see quite a bit of the lava lake. You can't quite see that bottom edge of it right there, but you see quite a lot. We'll keep it moving here and share one from Chaz Beasley, Sunrise Monday. This appears to be from Kupinahipali, Waldron's Ledge. There's a tree at the edge of the overlook, and there is a lava lake. You can see, zoom in on that. You can see most of that over here. Don't as easily see that pit in the background, this image at least, but maybe I got the location wrong perhaps too. So that one, I believe, Kupinahipali over here in the east. And working our way back around, let's focus on the last one, Kinakakoi. And show you guys a couple there. This one's from Yvonne Bauer. Mahalo, Yvonne. Thanks for watching. Moonset and Lava Lake. And there, Mauna Loa in the background. Moonset. There is that lava lake visible from Kinakakoi. You see that little bit of that pit in the background, right back in there. Zoom it in a bit. Yeah, and once again, you see that this front edge here does obstruct a little bit of the front view of this lake, but good views all around, depending on what it is you're looking to see, or how much, or how little, or what's their priority. You can see amazing things from all those locations there. There's one more I want to share from Jennifer Myers. Hello, Jennifer. Play this short video here. This is from the 8th. Oh, that didn't work. See, where's the right button? No, that wasn't the right button either. All right, well, let's try this again. Expand, paint. Now manually zoom it in. So there is that lava lake in the back, the fountains. Panning across the lava lake from Kinakakoi, you see all those zones of fountaining still, and you see those few remaining trees on the edge of the crater here in the foreground. Hello, Jennifer. Pretty cool to see that. We'll feature one last video here, and this one is by Sky Makai. Mahalo, Sky, for your contributions to Hawaii Tracker. And once again, I'll play it without sound, but this is a compilation of different shots that he took over that first day and maybe a couple of days of the eruption. So see, he's playing with the speed a little bit, showing you real time, showing you time lapse, different parts of the lava lake. That was that junction zone. Undulating crust really shows you how it's liquid all underneath, even if it's dark on the surface. There's those occasional bursts of gas, throwing lava really high in the air. More steady, lower outbursts of gas there, and vibration, and now time-lapse vibration of that crust undulating as the gas is bursting through it from below there. Fountain there. Pretty amazing, all the different views that came out of this eruption thus far, and still a pretty big area to look at. Of course, we're down to the one fountain, so it may not be quite as spectacular as the first few days in that regard, but still a lot that can be seen there. All right, so that was our lava viewing report. We'll switch over to our hazards. Right button on here. And just start off by showing you guys the SO2 rates for the last year, just a little preview. I'll go back into more of the monitoring stuff later, but This is the whole last year, so we're catching the end of the last phase of eruption where it was at around 5,000 tons per day in February, and it had been decreasing, and it was down in the hundreds in December, right? So then we jump back up. Here on the right is our highest point. That comes in at 12,500 tons per day. That's the first reported value. It could have been higher than that. It could have been 2-4 times higher maybe. So several tens of thousand, maybe 50,000 tons per day, but the first measurement we get was 12,500. The next day, 9,500. The next day, 4, and most recently, 3,500 is the most recent value of SO2 emission rates. So started off higher in the early days, but now we're actually back at a similar level as we were about 6 months ago, which is interesting to see. So it's not only did the whole crusting over and retreating process of coalescing to one fountain happen faster, we're also seeing a gas decline at a faster rate too. So that's the quick version. Since we're talking about viewing, we'll focus on the park here first to transition us over. Assuming it loads, here we go. Air quality in the national park. And here's a summary every 15 minutes, and it looks like it's showing green at the present for most of these plots. Not all. Here's Kahuku over by Ocean View, southwest part of the island, away from the main national park area, but picking up SO2 there. There are some other areas, Devastation parking lot, picking up some SO2. Nahuku, very briefly picking up some SO2. I don't see anything else on here, but however, when I did look earlier today, we did notice that Volcano Arts Center had, off the graph here to the left, did have some of those spikes. So we'll look at that when we come and look at the air quality data, but for now, the park is looking good. There's another set of images released by the USGS today, and this is from a set taken yesterday. And this one's actually focusing on the gas, so I'll put it in here. They're talking about the thermal inversion layer, right? So you can see here's a plume coming from the volcano, it's hitting this layer, and the denser air, and it's able to then flatten out and spread laterally as opposed to going any further up there. So that main pit, sorry, that reactivated western pit is here. The main lava lake is off the image to the left here. Here's another view of that. Your Mauna Loa standing above. The inversion is pretty low at this point in time. So there is a plume and not a whole lot of wind, so it's just kind of collecting all across here on that inversion layer there like that. Not kind of coming any higher. So in those kind of times, there could be a little bit more fog in particular areas, and I think that's what we're looking at on Volcano Village area back on the 9th. There is an aerial view. Here's the edge of Kilauea caldera, so the lava lake and everything is off in this direction down here. But there is the old Jagger Museum, the HVO building, your current parking lot. The Nene are off over here somewhere in this area, back in there. But what you do after you park in the parking lot here is you walk this trail, do it right there. And this is the viewing area where Kahuna to look. Still showing the localized fog there, right, on Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea. So here they explain it a little bit. An inversion layer forms when there is a temperature inversion of the atmosphere, warm air on top of cold air. The top layer prevents the air below it from rising, forming a distinct cloud layer shown here between Kilauea. So a little bit of a extra insight into the gas. Since we do have that new VOG measurement, 3560 tons per day has been put in here as a source for Kilauea. So now we have some more realistic VOG forecasts for the next couple of days here. And you can see that it's going to be pretty intense in South Hawaii, Pahala, Na'alehu, Ocean View areas, and also wrapping around into South Kona as well. Seeing South Kona getting some of those effects as well. Could be more localized, but occasionally you do see one of these bigger masses of gas working way across there, according to the forecasts. So that's the forecast, and we'll look at the observations now, and for that we'll turn to purple air. Let's see if this will load. It says loading. And it did load, all right. So there is our current color map, right? The yellows are the ones that are picking up some of the fog at present. And what's really nice about this, I think, is when you click somewhere like Pahala over here, it says it's 25 now, great, but it also gives you this history plot. And it actually Wood Valley here, where it's showing you, okay, we're in a green now, but you can see that at 12 o'clock it was back in the yellow, and earlier today it was back in the yellow as well. Yeah, yesterday before 12 o'clock it was in the yellow as well, and you can see there's variations of the pattern. So that one was Wood Valley. What was that one? Let's see if I can see the spot. Okay, go. That one. Look at the volcano one. So there's volcano, and zooming it in this time. But see, it's been going up and down. It actually touched into this orange zone briefly on the yellow on the 9th, on the 10th, and on the 11th as well. Over on the Kona side, let's go to South Kona. In the yellow currently, and you can see there's been elevated, more consistent further away from the source there. So VOG is an issue once again, unfortunately. But thankfully, the emissions are going down as well. So that's the gas. We're getting through Kilauea here. We'll turn next to the monitoring data, looking at our graphs, and starting with the lava depth. So not quite clear what's going on here at the right end of the graph, but let's look here to the left here. There is the pre-eruption depth and then our initial flood, and a slower rise has occurred since that initial burst came out. And here it looks like they're actually possibly pointing at something else. Like normally when we see, well, here's a 1 month lava depth plot, right, showing that same kind of pattern. When you have fog or gas, sometimes you get this kind of noise, like it looks like this. That's a little bit more scattered. That would suggest it's some kind of natural interference. So we don't really see that here as much. It makes me wonder if they could potentially be considering moving this. This is an automatic laser rangefinder. It points at that western persistent lake. But since that is no longer the nexus of activity, since it's now coming out of that southeast area by that southeast fountain, it would be reasonable to point the laser to that southeast area. You also want to be able to compare it from the west to east, and so maybe that's why it's a little bit of back and forth or not. We'll wait for an explanation. That would be my best guess at this point in time. What might be going on there? Might be considering moving the laser. We had heard in the past that they have moved it before, usually fine-tuning it within that west vent area because that lake was bigger and it also shrunk, and at some point it was pointing at the lake. At some point it was pointing at the bank, and the bank would rise, but it wouldn't be the same kind of thing. So we'll have to wait and see what's going on with this, but in either case, slow rise, and it could be that looking at different parts of the crater, which we know are moving differently, right? They have different elevations. So there's how it looks over the past month. That lava depth had been pretty stagnant at that low level for a while before this most recent burst up. And here's our tilt. So for the last week, there is our earthquake and beginning of the eruption right here. And you can see the overall pattern has been one of coming down and flattening out. However, superimposed on that, you're getting deflation, inflation, deflation, inflation, deflation, inflation, deflation, inflation, deflation, inflation, deflation, and that's where we are now. So that's that overall pattern, and that's what I was pointing out earlier when a lava lake seems to be spreading and ebbing, but kind of getting smaller every time. It's because of this deflation inflation pattern we're seeing. There it is for the whole last month, and here we are essentially following that deflation inflation pattern here as we saw prior to the eruption, prior to the last couple earthquakes there and there, and going on for a while. And that's thought to be something that's almost a background process of Kilauea, because its summit magma reservoir is almost always doing something, filling, circulating, churning in some way, as long as people have been here monitoring it with these advanced instruments. So that's something we've seen fairly consistently. There are times where it's less common and times where it's more common, but we've been in an era of more common for a while here, and so this is all normal. GPS is starting to show a little bit. 1 year across the summit, north to south, you see mostly that climbing range here that's spreading apart. Got a little intrusion. Have some smaller adjustments here, but now we see, once again, a little adjustment with a little downturn. You see it jumped up for the eruption and then coming back down as it seems to be following that same pattern as a tilt, right? I actually would expect this to follow the tilt pattern and flatten out once again there, and then eventually turn back up once you restrict the volume coming out, so not all of it can come out through that vent into the lake, but some amount will start building underground as well, which is why we had this entire climb. Even with lava coming up to the lava lake at the surface, it was still filling underground and pressurizing more and more and more. So that's it. Here's a East Rift Zone at Pu'o'o, still showing that same pattern, still contracting. It looked like last week it might have been bumping up a little bit, and we have seen these little variations where it will go up a little bit and then down and up a bit then down. So I did that a little bit again here too. It might have been related to what we're seeing with the pulses of magma in the summit, but in any case, it's long-term inconsequential. All right, SO2, here is that zoomed-in version of the 1-month plot. So here we were in the hundreds back in December, and then jumping up to that 12,500, 9,500, 4,000, and then 3,500. So there's our... And then zoomed out, and this is why I showed you this graph. You can compare to the earlier plot for the whole year, and there's our data on the right. Earthquakes on Kilauea. For the last month, earthquakes per day. Here's since eruption began, everything's been low. That's a current pattern, and that built up beforehand. And likewise, for the last year, looking at earthquakes per week, this current week is not going to reach anywhere near those other levels of earthquakes that we had the previous 3 weeks here. So that's all predictable. This eruption hasn't been going on for a full week yet, so if we look at our last week plots, it's going to show a little bit of our build-up to that eruption beginning here, so that's what's actually showing here. And likewise for the last month, showing the whole month of activity leading up to this. So there is a whole lot of earthquakes under the summit there. That was one of our clues. That's it on the monitoring here. But as always, we'd like to cite our sources, which is USGS HVO, going through some of the updates. Back from Saturday, they noted no significant changes. They just read the differences in the updates here from one to the other. I don't pay much attention to the tilt meters. They were talking about deflation and inflation on that very, very small DI scale, which is less interesting to me than an overall pattern of it. So I don't find it very useful to see hour to hour whether it's going up or down. It's more the long-term process. But it does report the gas, 12,500 tons per day for January 6 here, and no unusual activity on the rift zones. Right? It's key and consistent, hasn't changed. So that was Saturday. Sunday, the only change here, the active lava area in the eastern half of the crater shrunk slightly over the past 24 hours. This has been a common occurrence during the early stages of recent eruptions. And they also report 9,500 tons per day here on Sunday. On Monday, they note that the active lava area in the eastern half of the crater now has one dominant fountain, and the active area has shrunk slightly over the past 24 hours. And report coming to yesterday, Tuesday, we have all the same, 3,500 tons per day reported for January 9th. Otherwise, nothing else has changed. And finally today, no new gas measurement, and it's really no new anything else in the update. It's the same as it was yesterday. So it was shrinking, it's still shrinking. It seems like that shrinking rate has slowed down a little bit, right? We're looking at that long-term deflation with that superimposed pattern of DI events, and maybe that's what we're actually noting. As we saw with Mauna Loa, as we saw with Kilauea before, it's likely this will change to inflation at some point, and you might see it at that point really stabilize, and we'll have a better idea of what shape it might sustain once it reaches that point. But it does seem like even a tilt that's dropping is starting to flatten out in the big picture of it. So as always, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So that's our source, HVO, USGS. Mahalo for all the webcams and reports and images and videos and all that that's been provided. Allows us to explain a lot easier too. So that's the monitoring Kilauea. Let's zoom out and generalize a little bit and look at the earthquakes. So earthquakes on the island. This is for the whole last week. So it is also including a little bit of Kilauea here in yellow, but I wanted to just point out across, like Pahala is still happening, and get some other background events, Mauna Kea and elsewhere off island. But Mauna Loa is pretty quiet is the key, and if I come and switch this to, let's look at the last one day and all the magnitudes. This gives you a better idea of what's happening right at this instant. There was one earthquake in Kilauea and one in Mauna Loa, so they're both quaked out and depressurized, really, from one from having erupted and finished, and the other from having released that first phase is usually the most productive and that gets the most work done out of the eruption. So that's for the earthquakes. There's not a whole lot else to really get into there. So what we'll do is we'll focus on Mauna Loa at this point in time. There's not like a whole lot to say here, as we mentioned before. But here is a tilt for the last week showing the day-to-day cycles. Here it is for the last month showing day-to-day cycles, but also showing a little bit more of this rising trend. Now this is something that I don't know if I have a plot saved for the old Mokuove'oveo tilt meter before this eruption, but it did experience these not only these cycles that go up and down on a day-to-day basis, but you also saw these monthly cycles on a longer time scale, right? Order continue. So it's not quite clear how much is that signal and how much is the actual ground swelling there. We'll have to wait and see. But USGS reports are saying that not anything has changed there and really nothing to report. So the more important and telling data to me is the 1-year GPS here, showing that giant widening of the crater as magma worked it to the surface, and then contracting again as it had a first phase of eruption doing most of the work. And then before the eruption was even over, we saw it turn around and start coming back up more quickly at first, now more slowly. And that's the pattern of it reinflating, refilling with magma, which is a normal thing for Mauna Loa. That's the length north to south, and this is just the up signal from one of the stations. So you can see that it went up a little bit, then dropped a whole lot when the lava cracked through and split the crater open. The crater actually split apart and dropped down. And it's come back up a little bit, but really not as much, not as fast. It's not the same pattern as you see here as what you see further up on the south length. Looks like my computer is getting bogged down here sometimes. So the yes amount of look get the birth wheel. Can you stay with I'm not sure what's happening. Sure signal here a little bit, come back up. Yeah, I can at all. Issue.
Can you hear me?
I did time.
Hello?
Yeah, here.
Me? Phil, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer you, but I guess you're not. Are you hearing me? So apologies. Maybe this is our cue to wrap it up here. I wish we could get to some of our questions.
No, you haven't been. We've been basically off the air for 5 minutes.
All right, should I just stop it?
I'm trying to see if the thing's coming back at all. But yeah, it's been pretty much out for probably 10 minutes. And then it went totally out like 5 minutes ago.
Can you hear me at all yet?
In and out.
How strange. Strange. All right, well.
Well, you can, I think, try and continue. Go ahead and test.
Yeah, if anyone is still here and hears me, give me some kind of sign.
Yeah, I think you're good.
Yeah, am I still coming through? Or am I coming through again?
Yep. So can try and finish it out.
All right. So I'm not sure at what point I actually cut out there, but maybe I'll just summarize Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa, the tilt could be that normal variation day to day and over the month. The month has these longer term cycles that we may or may not be seeing. It's not quite clear if that's what we're seeing or not. But we'll wait and see. However, the more telling is the summit GPS, which is showing that rebound, re-expanding the distance north and south across the caldera. That's the side-to-side distance, and the vertical up and down distance has come up a little bit, but not nearly as much, and that's also telling. If we compare this to what was seen after 75 eruption and 84 eruptions, this is the upper plot here. That's not really GPS until you get to this red part over here, but this is the distance, line distance, north to south across that same area. Here's a 75 eruption. Let me zoom it in. So after the eruption, we have this spreading of that line length until more or less in here. And what is that? If I come down, that looks like it could be a couple years after 75. And here is the 84 eruption. And that one's going up and up and up and up till about in here, more or less in there. If I scroll that down, you're looking at maybe 88, 89. So you're looking at 4 or 5 years of it actually inflating after the eruption. So when we see this signal, now I'm on low one, it's come up a little bit, that is normal, right? It's not just the GPS, a combination of GPS, and if I pull this back up and zoom it back out, it's not just when a line is going up, but it's when it's going up there, and you can also combine it with the earthquake numbers. So when you have high earthquakes and a very rapidly rising line, that's your higher percentage of an eruption. However, note that in 2015, we did have that same situation, lots of earthquakes and an increase in the line, but that ended up being more of an intrusion. So it's not always a case that it comes to the surface, but that's the signal you're looking for, that pairing of the GPS and the earthquakes. So right now we have a little bit of GPS signal, that's normal, and no earthquakes.
Well, I think we should try and finish up because it's happening again.
Right, well that was really it. Apart from some thank
yous.
Well,
yeah, I'm going to try and get through those real quick then. All right, so we'd like to thank everybody that tuned in today. You know, we rely on viewers like you. Sorry for the interruptions, and we'll try and figure out what's going on with the signal. But yeah, we appreciate everybody that turns out, likes, subscribes, shares, sharing on Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff helps to get the channel out there, get the algorithms to take notice of it. So we appreciate all that. And I hope everybody can hear me, but yes, we also are sponsored by iCare Hawaii. We'd like to recognize them. They've helped us keep an eye on Mauna Loa. Now we kind of shifted that a little bit to Kilauea, but we still got to keep that, see how everything's going on Mauna Loa, make sure it's being quiet and all that, because don't want to get distracted on Kilauea, but we appreciate their support. as always. And then we also have support from the Bye Grant program from the County of Hawaii. And we want to thank them for helping us to continue to produce this type of content. And in the written form, we produce that on Hawaii Tracker and hawaiitracker.com. We do the live videos, we do short videos, and all that kind of stuff. They make it possible. So we really appreciate their support. We also had a couple of super chats come through. Want to acknowledge those as well. Longtime supporter now, Chris Kiki, came through, and it looks like that crashed when I got rid of half of my chat, so I don't have the message. I believe it was a $25 super chat. Appreciate that one. And then we had a $5 super chat from Jared Wilson, no message. Appreciate that as well. We can try a question or two if you want.
Give it a shot, and if we peace out, then thank you guys for tuning in. But we'll try it.
Yeah. So the Eric asks, question for Phil: is there an estimation of how much of the Halemaʻumaʻu crater lava lake is still liquid beneath the crust that we now see?
I don't have a good estimate of like how much it's cooled on the outside, but it's, I would say, generally speaking, most of it's mostly liquid still in there. It hasn't had that long, and it's been replenished by lava coming through there and that extra heat for a while. So most of it's not very precise there. I wish I could give you a better answer, Eric, but yeah. At the center, we know that pit dropped down 1,600 feet and has refilled since about 1,200 feet. So at the deepest point, you might have over 1,000 feet of lava, I'll say. That's still liquid in it. And I think that's still being conservative a little bit. I would guess that the cooling on the edges might be in the order of 10, 20, 30 feet, somewhere in that range. Crusting over, it's probably more or less the thickness of that crust as well. Maybe the upper crust is a little bit thicker than that, but those are just ballparks, intuition, and just guesses, really, right? Don't really know, but somewhere in the middle, it's got to be close to 1,000, if not over it, of liquid heat.
Saw a question. Yeah. All right. Saw a question from Kenny who asked, do you think the eruption's already fading?
I mean, it's certainly progressing and slowing down, and that's one way to put it. Fading, I suppose. Before the 2021 reactivation, we had 4 months of break of it recharging. So we saw it last a few weeks before it actually got to this little bit lesser phase, right? We only had about a month really where this thing was off, where it reactivated. So that makes sense that it would already be losing the built-up gas and energy it stored. However, I think that probably that pipeline coming in is open and it's very well established. We've seen through deflation-inflation events that the lava lake surface responds, it seems like, in real time to the inflation-deflation cycles. So I imagine a path that fissure that's feeding the current eruption and fountain through the lake is probably pretty healthy, right? So I imagine it's going to keep feeding lava in like the west vent area was for a while, and the eruption, I would suspect, would go on for some time just based on what's done in the last couple of years already, right? So maybe the surface area is changing, but we could keep looking at, does some little area stay open to release the gas and keep circulating, and does that entire crust of that surface start rising up as well? Would be things to look at. But certainly the surface activity does seem to be waning already. And it's not, there's still a lot to see. There's still a while to go of going and seeing it, so don't let me discourage you from going up and checking it out. But it is certainly not what it was on the first day already, or the second day.
All right. Jared asks, points out that, or talks about the size of the lava lake looking like similar to 2018 levels, pre-2018 levels, and wonders if that has any implication for future eruptions.
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously has some implications. There's like a whole world of possibility out there, so maybe I can try to focus it a little bit more, Jared, and appreciate you sticking with us here. As far as the amount of ground that collapsed in 2018 and how much has been refilled, we've refilled about 30% of what we lost. So we still have 70% to go to get back to the 2018 levels of volume, right? Now, in 2018, all that volume that collapsed wasn't all liquid. Right? There was a lot of the actual surrounding crater floors that collapsed in. So that's a difference there as well, right? But that was all because of the opening through the East Rift Zone that was caused by that 6.9 earthquake on the south flank, and prior to that, that 4.2 at Pu'o'o that opened the East Rift originally to allow the 6.9 to be the domino effect, right? So that was really driven by the East Rift for it to actually propagate further over. So someday the East Rift or the Southwest Rift could do something similar, where it opens some pathway, and in that case, you could drain some of that summit stuff, right? And the fact that it is liquid rather than solid might make it more mobile, depending on how you actually have that develop. There are lots of stories of Southwest Rift eruptions where after the fissure in the Southwest Rift opened up, they could actually see the surface lake draining to the point where they could see the crack on the wall of the crater leading to the Southwest Rift. Right, so that certainly is possible as well. That could do something like that. Similar, but like kind of a whole other tangent. I probably shouldn't talk too long because our issues here. But like when we look at the lava lake era of 100 years ago that Jagger described, with all the different islands and different features and semi-solid plugs and ring eruptions, that kind of stuff is the other consequence of having this big pond of lava that's cooling but being replenished by gas and new stuff. It's kind of this sludge of different ages of lava and different textures and hardness and compositions, whether lava shoots up into fountains and causes foamy rock that's less dense, or whether it actually is forming denser flows that are on the actual surface. All that stuff makes a difference as well. So those are other implications that you'd have from having this big pond of lava / magma, depending on how you split hairs there on the surface.
Right. Well, I think that gets us through, questions. There's so many questions, but a lot of these I believe, have already been answered in one way or another, and don't want to be continuing on and want to get out of here while we can still communicate with you. Coming up on an hour and a half now. Go over a little bit of the events coming up. We have tomorrow the beginning of the Volcano Awareness Month, right? And we have the presentation that is tracking active faults and ground deformation south of Kilauea caldera with Hilo's Geology Department, and that will be with Steve Lundball, Lundblad, and we will be trying to bring that to you live with 2 pineapples. We'll see how that goes. And then on Saturday, we have the Ocean View meeting with USGS and Civil Defense that we'll be trying to visit and at least record it. We'll see how that goes. It's always an issue trying to do lives at some of these events, but we'll give it a shot and get something posted from there. Be interesting to hear what everybody has to say after going through that eruption on Mauna Loa, right? Get one under the belt. I wonder how much the conversation changes, right? Now everybody has a bit of experience in what to expect.
And that's where the feedback of whether someone expected to hear a siren or not, or to have an evacuation notice, or all that stuff can flesh out as at that event. So since we won't be back with you guys till next week Wednesday, let's cover next week Tuesday as well. Next week Tuesday, West Hawaii Civic Center in Kona, 6 p.m. a volcanic hazard talk as part of Volcano Awareness Month. And Wednesday, we'll try to keep our stream short next week and end before 6, so that we can switch to the Nale'u live event there. Yep. The next week, Thursday, back in Hilo. So one other event to mention, and that's in the national park on Tuesday the 17th as well. And that is Liliuokalani at Washington Palace. January 17th marks the anniversary of the legal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, 1893. The park presents an amazing one-woman show written and performed by Jackie Pualani Johnson, who reenacts the Queen's remembrance and the solace she found in family after the overthrow of her kingdom. So that's Tuesday, the 17th at 7 p.m. So right after this talk on Kona, and we'll see if we can, we're trying to figure out a way to get that streamed. So that's all within the next week, and we can cover stuff afterwards beyond that next week.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, wait, let's get out of here. It's not the technical issues are gonna suffocate us.
All right. Well, mahalo everybody for joining from HawaiiTracker.com. He's Dane DuPont. I'm Philip Ong. Mahalo for joining us. Appreciate all your support.